Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Hotel News Now podcast. I'm news editor Sean McCracken with STR's Jesper Palmqvist, all the way across the world in Singapore. Jesper, new year, new chance to dive into all the things going on across Asia Pacific region. What's your big takeaways for the month of January?
Thanks, Sean. Good to hear from you. Definitely excitement about the new year, and the whole thing that people saying, "When can you stop? When can you stop saying Happy New Year?" Well, the good thing of living in this part of the world is you don't really stop, because as soon as that one ends, the Lunar New Year is around the corner.
That's
So you
fair
keep
enough.
saying it. You keep saying it for about a month. It's really good. The big story right now is obviously a lot of people talking about what does it look like, and it depends on, obviously, from an investor or brand or anything, what you're interested in. But it's about, did anything change over the last couple of months, and then what's happening in 25. And the main story is really that we continue to see a strong end to 24, and January has been quite strong in a lot of markets. I'll happy to give you some of the ins and outs of that, and then also I want to talk a little bit about the demand on the books that I spent some time looking at, what that looks like for the next few months as well, where actually more positive than we expected.
Mm-hmm. So the year of the snake outlook is what we're going to get.
That is exactly what we're going to get. And people who are afraid of snakes will need to suffer that through an entire year. Speaking on behalf of a colleague.
The funny thing about that is I told my son, it's like, it's going to be the year of the snake. And he was very excited about it because apparently snakes are his favorite animal.
Well, he's in for a good year. It's very auspicious for him then, if he's into that sort of thing. It's a turn, and we'll cover that a little bit today, and talk about China and the expectations when it's so tied to the overall country and the economy, and when it's so massive, and what the latest is for there. But why don't we start talking a little bit about what's happened in the last 45 days, last month and a half, coming in January and at the end of the year. And what was really interesting was how pretty much all the countries, like the main countries around the region, had positive growth. And we're seeing this, and I say positive compared to the prior quarter, to last year, and the last few years. It's been really strong growth. And even when you extrapolate and take out New Year's Eve around the end of December, so regardless of taking that out or not, it's really strong. And I think you can guess the strongest growing country in terms of that is driving rate. You get one guess, Sean.
Oh, I mean, that's kind of hard because you assume it's been so strong in Japan, it can't keep
There you go.
driving
Ding,
through.
ding, 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 ding.
All
It's
right.
Japan. Door number one, it is Japan. And this is the thing, right? So we it's okay to keep talking about Japan because there's a lot of stuff around it. So Japan has continued growing over December into January, and when we forecast and look at the business on the books, there's all the fundamentals are, and demand and tourism overall and business travel is extremely strong. So it is the fastest growing. It was in 24, and it remains at the moment in this quarter as well. And I think that is maybe one of the big stories. So not only from an investment perspective, but from tourism and all those factors. It's really hot.
Mm-hmm. Do we see? I know obviously the strength in Japan is driven a lot by currency, but usually in any hotel market, country, city, whatever, you see this period of everyone saying it's going to continue like this forever. There's no signs of this ending, and eventually investment catches up, supply catches up. It literally cannot go on forever. But are there any signs on the horizon that the party might be wrapping up at any time soon in Japan?
Not directly, and where we see now. If you look long term, absolutely. I think everyone agrees that, of course, this growth is going to stop. There's a ceiling for everything. And if you talk about those ceilings from a different, obviously there's the 40 million arrivals. That's a target. When we start reaching one point in time when there's just so many people going to the main arteries, the main destinations where people want to go. And that's one thing. But it is true. Exchange rate's still over 150 and per dollar, and absolutely for anyone who leans on the dollarized economy, that and most currencies, it is affordable for that. And then it is just that Japan, people come back with good experiences. and
Yeah.
there's very little scandals or things that have happened, right? That people feel safe. For instance, all the Chinese coming outbound now for Chinese New Year, the ones who travel out there, and other times of the year for holidays, Japan becomes the number one target. Flights are reasonably affordable in and out of Japan certainly helps, and there's a lot of it. So I think all those factors are still in play, and we look at this quarter, no difference at all. And it's just when you look at how far out there is a strong business on the books for a market like Tokyo, it is 8% stronger business on the books compared to the same
Mhm,
time
mhm.
last year, and that was strong growth then. So,
Yeah. So I guess I was meaning to ask you this later in the podcast, but since we're kind of on the topic of Japan now, it makes sense to bring it up.
mm,
Obviously, demand there is so strong. If you're someone who lives in Japan, maybe that's not the best experience from your perspective, being kind of flooded with all of these international tourists. With that in mind, Kyoto announced new um, hotel taxes, specifically with the over tourism in in that city as the backdrop. And I'm just wondering, across Japan or maybe even in other Asia Pacific markets that are kind of going gangbusters, like, are you seeing this as kind of a trend? Like, do we need to worry about the kind of regional, local pushback and whether that manifests as taxes like we've seen, not just in Kyoto, we see it in Austria, New York, and a bunch of places that are kind of curbing these big giant crowds.
mm, yeah, I think you're right in that it is a trend, and it's obviously not the first time this is happening throughout history. We've seen it in a number of markets. Uh, it's a political tool, it's an economic tool, it's what people in power and in tourism try to use as one of the levers. It's
Mhm.
definitely just one of them, and there's ways that you're trying to figure out. Maybe the biggest one and the more important one is long-term planning on how civil services and logistics work in a country and what you offer and experiences. Now, every country doesn't work like that. Now, in Singapore, we're blessed with in a small country and strong, economically viable. They can plan ahead and cater
Yeah.
for that. And in Japan, when they introduce that, obviously it hits the news, and it goes up. And if someone who pays over 130 US for a room night, they need to pay a $7 extra. Not going to have
Yeah.
a big impact, right? But with
Yeah.
flights and everything, it's not like it's the annoyance of something else added, an extra line item, sure, a little bit, but it's another tool to fund all this new tourism, yes, and the expense of that. And in one way, getting people to don't just go to Kyoto, Osaka, and Tokyo. Go
Yeah.
to Hiroshima, Nagoya, Fukuoka, anywhere, Beppu or anywhere. That's true.
Yeah.
But people want to go to the main markets. You can't really change that, but you can try and get them to stay longer and get out there. That's fine. And that's one of the tools, I think. So maybe not massive impact in Kyoto per se, and obviously Kyoto has tons of tools to do and kind of curb don't go to these specific streets and take photos, with the geishas and all that
Mhm.
people
Mhm.
also read about with mass tourism. But Auckland, for instance, much heavier impact with the bed tax that came in there, debated over years and introduced. So in other places, it can have a negative impact
Mhm.
beyond just some headlines. But I don't see it in Japan from that sense right now.
So obviously Japan continues to be the big headline top performer. Then what other markets do we really want to dive into?
Yeah, I think out of the ones that keep growing and doing well, you have two camps. Kind of, you have the ones that finally got underway, and that's your Vietnam, Cambodia, and Southeast Asia. They're a little bit behind. So we've seen this month how they've started to grow a little bit better, finally getting some of the resorts back, not to fantastic levels, but starting to come back. And also a market that was heavily dependent on Chinese outbound, Chiang Mai, fine in north of Thailand finally starting to come back. So that's kind of the last steps of that, really.
Mhm.
But in the more mature market, if you will, December, November, like Bangkok, the last 2 months and the end of last year was absolutely stunning. Hotels breaking bottom line and flow through records. Really, really strong. Indonesia, India doing really well. Like I mentioned New Year's earlier. So when you obviously it's just a few days and it's peaking and spiking up. Maldives this year, it's so obvious. Like people go to Maldives to celebrate New Year's, right? So
Yeah.
for 4 nights in a row, I think it went either above or just below about $1,400 a night, and that's for the entire market. Not
Hmm.
right? So I think most people would be happy with that. I think
Hmm.
so. The story is really that a lot of these countries are doing well, good growth over quarter, over last year, and everything. The only markets that show some kind of negative growth is apart from China, but it's smaller markets that will have some built-in volatility, and that would be your French Polynesia, maybe your Guam, your Sri Lanka, those kind of markets. Otherwise, the only big market is China, where there is, of course, a an expectation that it will turn this year. I really
Yeah.
got to say it. Everything you read and say about it is they expect that the financial instruments and making sure that both the residential and office markets that there will be a turning point. But that is different from hotels, right?
Yeah.
We know that there were new guidelines put into place as well that are tightening in how developers can put brands into place in hotels, and that's just part of maturity. China remains a great location to visit compared to historically. I think domestic tourism, it's so big that if you look at those markets out west, northeast, and the other one we talked about, the new tourism markets, and there are many of them, they're doing pretty well. It's the
Hmm.
tier one and a half where, yeah, that slump takes a bit longer.
Yeah. And obviously, here stateside, we're still waiting for all of those tourists to come back here, but
That's
geopolitics
true.
might have some play in that.
Yeah, and you know what? But that's a really good. One of the more important questions we get now is like, well, the outbound of the Chinese. When you look at the New Year coming up next year, 新年快乐 to all Chinese-speaking people. Happy New Year. It's really the markets that are getting a lot of that demand would be more close, right? Because you still have the Russian airspace thing, and you're
Mhm.
missing some of the inbound flights. But it's also a little bit those who are more closer to, like
Yeah.
befriended with China at the moment, right? So you're
Yeah.
Malaysia, Thailand, Singapore, Korea right now is actually getting a lot of it as well, and then in Japan. So it's closer, right? That are getting a lot of
Hmm.
those volumes when you look at the Chinese New Year.
Hmm. For sure. So, is there? I do wonder. I mean, obviously, we talked about the Maldives impact in other portions of the region. Like, how does the Lunar New Year play out, or is it mostly a Chinese and the adjacent markets phenomenon?
So when you're talking about the I was going to say the which New Year?
Yeah, the Lunar New Year.
Yeah, yeah, no, yeah, not the Burmese or Myanmar New Year. Uh,
And we
and I
can
can't
dive into
remember.
those if you want.
No, there's many of those, right? I can't believe, we have staff from Myanmar, and she told me I can't remember. It was the year 1400 something right now.
Oh,
Um,
really?
yeah, the it's always, I mean, traditionally, it's
Mhm.
about domestic, and it's mass volumes is for
Yeah.
sure domestic, right? Billion people traveling and going to home or to holidays. So that still happens, and that's going to be
Mhm.
big. And then the outbound that has grown so much in the last decade and now coming back, it, there is some influence. I mean, we know, for instance, when I was up in Bangkok last week, there were Thai hotels that were saying that cancellations came into play
Mhm.
when the most recent news hit about kidnapping up north, and there was
Mhm.
some controversy on the border with Myanmar, which is a volatile from a political sense still, right? So that has an impact straight away. People cancel
Mhm.
and pivot and maybe go to Japan instead. But
Yeah.
usually that Chinese New Year has you either go home to your family, but these days with that group business being changed into a lot more FIT and the younger generation, they save up, you know what, let's go for a week instead. We'll go and see Japan, we'll go to Korea, or we go to other markets. But news hits and it has an impact for a while, like the horrible air crash in Jeju. I mean, that will have an impact for a while. And then people look elsewhere, go to Vietnam maybe,
Mhm.
where it's peak season. One
Mhm.
thing we do know is they travel less to Sanya, the
Mhm.
Hawaii. So I mean, going to Sanya was so popular for a while and grew so quickly that it was always bound to draw back a little bit.
Yeah. So I assume, Jesper, as talented as you are at looking out and reading the tea leaves, you can't give me a specific reading on the kind of zodiac sign of what the year of the snake means for hotels, correct?
I listen. If I had my Chinese colleagues on, I'm pretty sure that they would. But yeah, seeing is believing. I wouldn't do it, but I think it is a year where my expectation, and I think I lean on a lot of our friends in the economic sector, and the people that we work with on forecasting. There is a, barring any other unforeseen events or tariffs and all sorts of stuff that, if extended over a long time and not short time, could have an impact, of course. But if you think about it, all the tariffs and stuff that usually just hinders border crossing. Domestic travel initially is still fine, and for China that works out pretty well, and for India and Indonesia and Australia, big countries. So I think my expectation right now is the second half of the year we'll see start to see some favorable growth in the engines of China as well. I think that it should be due by then, if not sooner, because the market is just so big. And remember, it is again primarily domestic, where you have the inbound is bigger than ever. 60 million last year, but it's so different. So I think Snake should be a pretty good year once it gets going. We know it can turn around quickly. It's done so in the past, but obviously that's me guessing a little bit, because it's hard to know what
it is hard to know.
What instruments will they deploy to get confidence in consumer spending? That is across many of the markets. It's the same in Thailand, right? Remember, household debt in Thailand is over 90% of GDP. That is a bit of a record for them.
Yeah, it's a big number.
10, 15 years ago, it was below 70% or so, and they're trying to get it down, but that's not easy.
So, switching tracks here just a bit, I do believe that this might be one of our last episodes that we don't have any real footy news to discuss until the start of the season, correct? We're getting increasingly close to the start of the year, but nothing new as of
That's right. We're getting close to where sports change over to the different season. And I mean, I would have to make do, since we last spoke, the fantastic test series in cricket, Australia-India, that broke attendance records. MCG seeing 370,000 people over those 5 days. And Australia won, should be said. But it was just an amazing test series that had everything. Shenanigans, great bowling, and rain and sunshine. So that's what I had to make do with while we wait for the mighty Swans in the footy season to get going. Yeah, excited about it. Ready to see what could come out of this. We'll see in the spring training here, and autumn training, as it were, in Australia.
Yes, not the same as pitchers and catchers reporting here in the U.S., but
correct.
We've still got our brand of football going, and I'm thankful for that. But as our next time talking, that will no longer be the case.
That's right. We're getting close.
All right, Jesper, I really appreciate the time and the insights.
Thank you, Sean. See you soon.
Hi, I'm STR's Isaac Colazo.
And I'm co-stars Jan Freitag. And together we are the data geeks behind Tell Me More, a hospitality data podcast on the Hotel News Now podcast network.
Every month, we bring you a fresh take on the latest hotel data, insights into the travel trends behind that performance, and the big picture topics you should be thinking about.
And we also don't mind getting into some good-natured disagreement from time to time. Hey, when Isaac and I start talking data together, anything can happen. And it usually does.
Find us on hotelnewsnow.com and subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you like to listen. Search for Hotel News Now, and thank you for listening.
This episode of the Hotel News Now podcast was recorded on January 23rd, 2025, and edited by Brian Roden. As always, visit hotelnewsnow.com for the latest news and information. And if you like our podcast, please rate and review on Apple, Spotify, or your platform of choice.